Hi, welcome back to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and this is part 2 in our continuing series to learn how to play Guild Ball using the Kickoff starter set published by Steam Forged Games. If you'd like to see the other videos in this series, including the previous one, in case you missed it, I'll put links to those in the description of this video. Now, I'm sure you'd like to dive right in, get on the pitch, pass the ball, knock over an opponent, and go for the goal. But first, we need to learn about the sequence of a turn. And when we refer to a turn in Guild Ball, we don't mean an individual player taking their turn. We mean all of the steps that are involved in what might otherwise be called a round in other games. So a round, or turn, in Guild Ball is actually made up of 4 phases, starting with the initiative phase. As we learned in the first video, after the kickoff, the receiver has initiative for the first turn. But at the start of all future turns, you'll determine who has initiative by having each player roll a single die. To help illustrate this, I've set up the board as if we're joining a game mid-session and players have just rolled for initiative. Now, during the previous turn, players may also have gained momentum points, which are represented by these tokens. Each player now adds 1 to their rolled value for all of their leftover momentum points. If there's a tie, as we see here with each player having a total of 4, they'll now re-roll the dice but retain their other bonuses until the tie is broken. The player who now has the highest total value decides which team has initiative. In this case, we'll say that the Masons decide to take initiative, and as we'll see, initiative dictates the order that players perform actions in later phases of the turn. Before moving on, players now discard all of their momentum points, and the one that does not have initiative, the Brewers in this case, will gain 1 momentum. Collected momentum can really be put anywhere, but a good place is right on top of your goal marker where the other players can easily see how much you have. So to summarize, during the initiative phase, both players roll a single die and add to that any leftover momentum points they have. If there's a tie, they'll re-roll the dice until the tie is broken, and the player with the highest value will then decide which of them has initiative for that turn. Then all momentum points are discarded, and the player who doesn't have initiative will gain a momentum point. Then it's time to move on to the maintenance phase, and here the player with initiative will perform 5 steps, and when they're finished, then the other player will also perform those steps. First, you'll resolve all current conditions on friendly models. These are the ones that belong to the same team as the active player, which would be the Masons in this case. And we'll go over all the conditions in a later video, but these are represented by the pentagon tokens that you'll find in this set. For example, Honor here has been poisoned, and so at this time, she will now take 2 damage, which we'll mark here on her health dial. Before resolving the next step, we also need to understand a little bit about the taken out condition. This occurs whenever a figure is pushed off of the pitch or their model is reduced to 0 health. In either of these cases, the models are removed from the pitch, and there isn't a specific token for this. I personally just like to place them on top of their profile cards. In the second step of the maintenance phase, each of your friendly models that are suffering the taken out condition now receive an Icy Sponge. This is a term that represents their wounds getting treated before they get sent back onto the pitch. There isn't a specific token for this, since any friendly model currently taken out during the maintenance phase is automatically Icy Sponged. Now in the third step of the maintenance phase, a player can choose to return to the pitch any friendly model suffering the taken out condition. Because they were just treated with an Icy Sponge, they'll return to the field with their current health, increasing it, if necessary, to their Icy Sponge level. This is marked on the model's health line with this symbol. And each player, including mascots, will have a single Icy Sponge level. So in this example, if we were to send Honor back to the pitch, we would first reset her health back to 9. You will notice this is marked on her dial with a white highlight. Harmony, however, was taken out by being pushed off the pitch, and her current health level of 7 is higher than her Icy Sponge level of 5. So when she returns, her health is not adjusted. In other words, returning players only modify their current health if it's less than their Icy Sponge level. When a model returns to the pitch, the controlling player puts its base in contact with one of these 3 edges of that player's deployment zone. Then the player may make a jog with that model if they wish. Bringing models back to the field like this is valuable as you'll have more players to use during that turn. But they're never restored to full health, so they're more vulnerable to being taken out again, which gives the other team points. Remember, you never have to bring a taken out model back to the pitch. You could leave them off for a turn or more, perhaps even for the whole game. Deciding when to leave a taken out player off of the field is actually a very important decision in the game. I should mention, if you've been playing Guild Ball since before the third season started, which kicked off with this starter set, then you might have noticed that there's been some changes to the Icy Sponge rules. There's no longer multiple levels to each of the models, meaning that the need to track these with tokens has basically been removed. In the next step of the maintenance phase, you'll generate your team's influence pool, and each model has 2 values on their profile related to this. The number on the left is its base influence. So Harmony here has a base influence of 2. To generate your pool, you add together the base influence of each of your models on the pitch. In other words, any you have suffering the taken out condition do not generate influence for you this turn. So the total pool for the Masons team, excluding Harmony, will be 10, which you indicate by collecting that number of influence tokens in your team's color. Then, for each goal you scored during the game, you collect one of these tokens as an additional influence for your pool. The final step in the maintenance phase is to divide up and assign your influence pool amongst the friendly models you have on the pitch. For example, it might look like this when I'm done. Models will use influence during the game to perform several of their actions, so you usually want to assign at least one to each of your models. Remembering again, you cannot assign any influence to a model that is not currently on the pitch. There's really only one other restriction when assigning this influence. The number showing on the right underneath of a player's influence represents their maximum influence. A model can never have more influence tokens assigned to them than this number. So Brick, in this case, can be assigned anywhere from 0 to 3 influence. Once the player with initiative has performed the 5 steps of the maintenance phase, then the other player does the same. So to recap, you first resolve any conditions on your models. And those with the taken out condition now receive an Icy Sponge. And then they can be returned to the field if you want. Then you generate your influence pool from all of your models on the field and then divide that influence up amongst them. The next phase of a turn is the activation phase. Starting with the player who has initiative, they'll now pick one of their friendly models and activate it. This is how a model will now perform its actions, which might include things like running down the pitch, attacking an opponent, kicking a pass, or attempting to shoot a goal. All of these things we'll learn about in a later video. But after one model activates, then the other player now picks one of their models to activate. And it will alternate like this back and forth between the players until each of their models have been activated once. In other words, once you activate one of your models, it will not activate again that turn, so be sure to use it to the extent you wish to, keeping in mind you can end its activation at any time, even if it still has some leftover influence. Note that each model on your team must activate, even if it was never assigned any influence, or if there's simply nothing you want to do with it. An activation in that case would simply mean picking the model, declaring you want to do nothing with it, and then play would again proceed to your opponent. This back and forth activation of models is key to the game because it means that as soon as one player does something, the other player can activate one of their models to address a new threat or take advantage of a new opportunity. Once all models on both teams have had their single activations, it is now the end phase. From all models, you now remove any tokens representing ongoing or sustained effects, which we'll learn more about later. All unused influence is also discarded. However, conditions are not removed, and leftover momentum points are still retained. Remember, you use these when determining initiative during the next turn. And with that, you now know the 4 phases that make up a turn. First initiative, then maintenance, activation, and the end phase. In the next video, we'll go over the actions related to movement and talk about ball possession. But if you have any questions about anything that you saw here, don't hesitate to put them in the comments below and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. But until the next episode, thanks for watching.